So very good morning, students. Welcome to IIT NEET Foundation or Focus C program by Krishnaveni Talent Schools and the Mastermind Schools. Once again, I welcome all the class 8th students for today's session. As you can see on the screen, and you are well aware, my subject is physics. We are in class 8th, our ongoing 5th chapter, friction. And today we are entering into the session number 2. So in the last class, we started a new chapter, friction. So far we completed one session. So we'll continue where we left in the last class. But before that, we just glance into the what we learned in the last class, right? So as you all know, in last class, we learned about only two important things. So what is friction and factors influencing the friction. Factors affecting friction. These are the two topics we learned. Means friction is nothing but a force. It's nothing but a force, but it is a nature's force. Nature's force. So no one applies this force. It comes into play in nature only. You can say it's a God's gift. So frictional force acts between the two bodies when they are in contact. Between any two bodies which are in contact, frictional force comes into play. That is compulsory. So it is a contact force. No doubt, it is a contact force. It will come into play when the two bodies are in contact. It may be your legs and floor, or tire and vehicle, road and tire, or any book and table. When there is a between my chair and me, everywhere where there is a two bodies are in contact, this nature's force comes into play. Nature's force comes into play. It's a very, very important kind of force in nature, which we cannot see, but we can experience. Because we cannot imagine our every movement without friction. If friction is not there, we cannot move also. I cannot hold the pen. So because of friction force only, I can able to hold the pen. Because of frictional force only, we can able to walk on the floor. Otherwise, for every step, we'll fall down. Because frictional force always acts in the opposite direction to the direction of motion. Suppose the body is moving this direction. So motion of the body in this direction. So frictional force acts in this direction. Suppose if you place a book on a table, the weight of the book acts in downward direction. At the same time, a force acts on the book in upward direction. As both forces are same, book remains on the table. If you apply some force and lift the book, it means that the force applied by you is overcoming the frictional force. Then only we can able to lift the book. Otherwise, you cannot. Right? So, friction is a nature's force. Nature's force acts between the two bodies which are in contact and acts in the direction opposite to the motion. Direction, suppose in a cycle you are riding a cycle. So it acts against the opposite direction of the tire, between tire and road. So when aeroplane is flying in air, that also friction, air friction acts opposite direction to the aeroplane. Suppose when you are rolling the ball on the floor, why ball is stopping after some distance? Because of the frictional force. So this frictional force depends on some factors. That depends on nature of surface. Whether surface is smooth or hard. See, if surface is very hard or rough, we can walk easily. But on smooth surface, frictional force is less, so we can slip. Suppose some oil is there or banana peel is there. When you place leg on the oil, what happened? We slip because oil reduces the friction. Right? Very important factor. Similarly, area of contact also very important. Okay. So nature of surfaces, area of contact are the main important factors which we discussed in the last class, which affects our frictional force. Right? So see how he's skidding. Just after skidding some distance, it stop. Why it stop? Because of the friction. If friction is not there, they won't move like that. So they are coming sliding. See, one is sliding faster because that is a smooth surface. Second one is very slow because of rough surface. Right? So it depends mainly on the either surface is smooth or rough. Up to that we learned in the last class, you can see here. Weight of the body, very important. Greater the weight, greater the frictional force. Nature of surface in contact are the main factors. It is independent of the shape of the body. No matter whether the body is circular or rectangle or triangle, frictional force is same. So there are some necessary evil effects. So friction is very good. No doubt it is a very useful for us. But along with that, some negatives also there, evil effects. Like friction will produce the heat. In a vehicle, when the engine rotates, so between the rotation, there is a rubbing between the two parts of the machine because the heat is produced. So every time you have to go for the change of oil because oil reduces the friction or grease reduces the friction. In your cycles also, after so many days, what you will do? You will put oil into that or grease into the cycle. Why? Because to reduce the friction. Otherwise, heat is produced and damages the material. So that is some important factors influencing the friction, right? So now we'll come to types of frictions. So we are saying that it is a nature's force. We cannot see that. Suppose muscular force is there. We can apply and you can see how much force we are applying. Electric force is there. We can measure by some meters. Magnetic force is there. We can measure. But we cannot measure the frictional force. We only can experience. We only can experience the frictional force. Such friction is classified into three categories. One is static friction. What is static? Rest. When one body is over the other body, which are at rest. When you place a textbook on table you keep the textbook. So between the textbook and the table, frictional force will act. That frictional force is called static friction. The frictional force between the two bodies which are in contact and are at rest. The opposing force that comes into play when one body tend to move over the other surface, but actual motion has to be started at is called static friction. We place the body, one body over the other. We are planning to start moving, but it is not moving. Why? Because the weight of the body and frictional force are same. It is about to start. Such a friction is called static friction. Very, very high friction this is. On every two bodies which are in contact and are at rest, the static friction will come into play. Right? So suppose this is a book. Weight of the book acts in downward direction. Normal reaction. Always is stable. The table exerts the force on the book with a normal reaction. If both are same. At the same time, it absorbs the force this direction. And frictional force acts in opposite direction. When a body is about to move this side, but frictional force acts opposite side. See, this is F. Then body remains. Suppose this force F is more than frictional force. then body will move this side. When both are same, body never move. See, if the applied force P and the body remains at rest, the static friction Fs is equal to F. Right? You can call it as Fs. If body is at rest and no pulling force is acting on it, the force of friction on it is 0. When there is no external force that acts, frictional force also 0. When you apply some force on a body, then only frictional force will come into play. Then, static friction is a self-adjusting force. Very important, see. Self-adjusting force because it changes itself in accordance with the applied force and always equal to the net external force. So static means rest. When body is at rest means as you increase the weight, one book you kept, over that one more book you kept, one more book. As you are increasing the weight, automatically the weight force, applied force increases. Same time frictional force also increases. Self-adjust. Increases and makes the body to rest. Unless the body moving, the force is called frictional force only, static force only, static friction. Once the body starts moving, the frictional force will decrease. But as long as a body is rested, the frictional force come into play on the body. Right? As we move forward. So, limiting friction. Suppose simple example I tell. We have one slide. Right? You place one ball here. Right? You place one ball. So initially like this you can see. You are ready to drop the ball. Ball you are not dropped. It is just here ready to drop like swing. At the time when you are ready to drop the ball, the force acting on the body is static friction. But when once ball starts sliding, just when it starts sliding, the friction acting on the body is called limiting friction. That is maximum friction where body starts moving. If applied force is increased, the force of friction also increases. If applied force exceeds the certain value, body starts moving. This maximum value of static friction up to which body does not move is called limiting friction. You are applying force, frictional force also will act. You are applying force, frictional force is also act. But at certain applied force, the frictional force won't act, it becomes less. At that time, body starts moving. So that maximum external force you are applying so that body starts moving is called limiting friction. Very important. Right? Then, the magnitude of limiting friction between any two bodies in contact is directly proportional to normal reaction. So, Fl is the limiting friction, is directly proportional to normal reaction. Or Rn you can say. Normal reaction is a perpendicular force acting on the body. Right? F is at R directly proportional to R. F is equal to mu R into R. Mu L. Mu is nothing but coefficient. So the direction of force of limiting friction is always opposite to the direction of verge of moving other over other. So this limiting friction always acts on the direction opposite to the motion. So whenever a applied force reaches the highest point, peak point, that peak point force is called limiting friction, which is directly proportional to the normal reaction. Force this direction, friction this direction, normal reaction is perpendicular to the surface in contact. And this normal reaction plays very important role in making the body from static friction to next friction, to reach to limiting friction and then to kinetic friction. Right? So the direction of force of limiting friction over here. Coefficient of static friction, here it came. Mu is called coefficient, constant. Mu S is called mu S. mu is nothing but coefficient. S is static. Mu s is called coefficient of static friction and is defined as the ratio of force of limiting friction by normal reaction. From here only. As we know, force of limiting friction is directly proportional to R, or Fl is equal to mu s R, or mu s is equal to Fl by R. If you know the two values, you can find out third value. The unit, because it's the ratio, there is no unit for this. Because both are force only. Force, limiting force and normal force. Force by force cancels, no units. It is only number. The value of mu depends on what factor is coefficient depends on material, nature of surface in contact. That is, what material the surface is made up of. Whether it is a rock, or whether it is a wood, whether it is a glass, or whether it is a plastic. Right. Then next also depends on the nature. Whether it is nature is smooth or rough, whether surface is dry or wet, everything depends. The mu value changes. So the mu value does not depend on the apparent area of contact. Same like friction. How much area the force is acting is not important. Not at all depend. Mu does not depends. The mu value generally varies from generally. It may be less than 1 or more than 1 for any surfaces. More than 1 we have one nature, less than 1 other nature. We'll discuss in the higher classes. So, first static friction, then comes during static friction, the maximum value of static friction is called limiting friction. And this limiting frictional force directly proportional to normal reaction. Okay, now another type of friction after limiting friction. When force reaches the peak level, the body starts moving or sliding. See there, the diagram. When body starts moving, the friction is called kinetic friction. Once body start moving, frictional force will reduce. Means the frictional force is maximum when body is at rest. Once body starts moving beyond the limiting friction, if you apply the force beyond the limiting friction, the body starts slide or move. Such force is called kinetic friction or dynamic friction. If the applied force increases further and sets the body in motion, the friction opposing the motion is called kinetic friction. So kinetic friction depends upon the again normal reaction only same. That is Fk is directly proportional to R, or Fk is equal to mu kr, where mu k is equal to Fk by R. Whereas mu k is called coefficient of kinetic friction. Right. So the value of mu k depends upon the nature of surface in contact. Same. Kinetic friction is always lesser than the limiting friction. Very important point. Limiting friction is always more because once body start moving, the frictional force reduces. Friction acts maximum on the body at rest. So static friction is always greater. Right? Thus, we require more force to start the motion than to maintain it against the friction. Once starting only will take more time. Once it starts, it is easy to move against the friction. Thus, we require more force to start a motion than to maintain. This is because once the motion starts, actually, the inertia of rest has been overcome. There is no inertia of rest because we are applying the force. Also, when motion has started, irregularities on surface have little time to get locked into the irregularities of the other surface. Kinetic friction does not depend on the velocity of the body type then, right? So again, there are types of kinetic friction. So in that again, when bodies start moving, right? When once body starts moving beyond the static friction, the kinetic friction starts. And that kinetic friction, that is the friction when the body is moving. It may be sliding friction like this. It may be sliding, a person is sliding here, see. It may be rolling. You can see how he is rolling with the rollers. So, sliding friction or rolling friction are the part of kinetic or dynamic friction. Okay. So, before going for the further explanation of this, I will show you one video for you on the same frictions, right?
Types of friction. Through one of our previous videos, we have already discussed what is friction and what is the reason for friction. If you did not watch the video, please do visit my channel and watch the video on friction part 1. Through today's discussion, we'll discuss about the different types of friction, namely static friction, rolling friction, sliding friction, and fluid friction. Let us look at this picture. It is a cup which is resting on the surface of a saucer, right? Another one, a ball resting on the ground. Here you can see many objects resting on the surface of another objects. That is the common speciality of these objects, right? All these objects are at rest on the surface of another objects. Do they experience any opposite force? Definitely yes. That is why they are not able to move. Even if you apply a small amount of force, these objects will not be able to start motion, right? We have to apply force enough to overcome the opposition offered by the surface. So frictional force which comes into play when objects are at rest can be called as static friction. Frictional force means it is the opposite force. So when the objects are at rest on the surface of another objects, we can call the opposite force as static friction. Static friction we can see in n number of situations. If you look around you, you can see n number of objects are at rest, right? I'm just listing 2 examples. It doesn't mean that only 2 examples you can find for static friction. A book resting on a desk, a potted plant sitting on a sidewalk. You just have a look around you, you'll be able to see n number of examples where static friction is being experienced. In this, the girl is sliding, right? Here, and in the third picture also, you can see the common speciality of these motion are these type of motions can be classified as sliding motion. So objects are sliding on the surface of another objects. At this time, the opposite force experienced by the objects due to the surface can be called as sliding friction. So sliding friction is the friction that occurs when solid surfaces slide over one another. When you look around you, you can see different examples. For example, pencil point and paper while writing, they experience sliding, right? While you comb your hair, surface of the comb and the strands of your hair will also be experiencing a sliding friction. You can list another 10 or 15 examples when you just have a close look around you. In this,
Rolling.
the second
It's
picture and in the third picture, you can see one thing very common, that they are having a wheel or it is having a ball, a spherical surface. So when these spheres or the wheels are moving, their type of motion can be called as a rolling
rolling.
motion, right? So friction experienced between surfaces in motion in which one of the surface has to be a wheel, a roller, or a ball, so that the type of motion is rolling and the friction experience there can be called as rolling friction. So rolling friction means it is the friction that occurs between surfaces in motion in which one of the surface has to be a wheel, a roller, or a ball, which means the type of motion has to be rolling motion. While riding a bicycle, tires and the ground will be experiencing rolling friction. While you play bowling, ball and the lane will be experiencing rolling friction, right? When you look at another examples, in this, the objects, in the first one, the man is flying in air, aeroplane is flying in air, the person is swimming in water. What is common in them? Air, water. They can be combinedly called
fluid.
as fluid. When solid objects are moving in fluid, then also they will experience some opposite force, resistive force. That kind of resistive force, when objects are moving
come across in
through
generally higher
liquid
classes.
or a gas. Through this resistance, objects will try to slow down. So this type of resistive force can be called as fluid friction. So fluid friction means it is the force that tries to slow objects down when they move through a liquid or a gas. It can be otherwise called as drag or air resistance. All gases and liquids can be combinedly called as fluids. So an aeroplane and a swimmer both will be experiencing fluid friction. I hope today's topics are very clear to all of you. Let's have a quick recap on what we have studied today.
Right.
Static friction is the friction when the surfaces are at rest. Sliding friction that occurs when solid surfaces slide over one another. Rolling friction means it will occur between surfaces in motion which one of the surface is a wheel, roller or a ball. Fluid friction means it is the force that tries to slow objects down when they move through.
Right. Just one more is there. We'll see. Somewhat information about the friction.
Frictional force. If a force is necessary to move an object, another force is required to stop it. This stopping force can be exerted by a person or an obstacle. However, the moving object comes to rest even in the absence of these forces. When we hold a pen in vertical direction as shown, the gravitational pull acts on the pen in downward direction. But as the pen is stationary, we can say that the total force acting on the pen is 0. This gravitational force acting on a pen is overcome by the force exerted by our fingers. Similarly, when we slide a book on a tabletop, it stops after moving a certain distance. Here, the tabletop exerts force on the book which is responsible to slow it down and then stop the relative motion between the tabletop and the book. Friction plays a very important role in our daily life. We are able to write, walk, apply brakes to slow down the vehicle, tie knots, fix nails and screws, make woven clothes because of friction. Force of friction not only tends to stop a moving object, it also tends to stop a stationary object from moving. That is why it is difficult to move the heavy box. Properties of frictional force. It is produced only when one body tends to move or is actually moving on another body. It always opposes relative motion between the surfaces of contact. Example of contact force, irrespective of the direction of the motion.
Types of friction. To move a stationary object, you have to apply force. As you apply continuously increasing force to the stationary object, the force of friction also increases. The force of friction between two or more solid objects which are not moving relative to each other is called static friction. As you apply more force, there comes a point when the object starts moving. At this point, the static friction is the maximum. Once the box begins to move, it is easier to slide it. This is because now, relative to the floor, the box is moving and the irregularities of the box and the floor do not get enough time to lock into each other. The friction produced between a surface and an object sliding over it is called sliding friction. Moving a box kept on a stand with wheels is much easier as the wheels roll over the surface of the floor. The friction produced between the rolling object and the surface is called rolling friction. It is easy to observe that the force required to start the motion of an object is more than the force required to continue to keep it in motion. It is thus justified to say that sliding friction is less than static friction. Also, Rolling an object is easier than sliding it. Hence, rolling friction is less than sliding friction. We can simply express it as static friction greater than sliding friction greater than rolling friction. Now you understand why it is convenient to pull a heavy travel bag fitted with rollers than sliding it. The principle of rolling friction is used in machines by using ball bearings. Ball bearings are small metallic balls which roll between two moving surfaces and reduce friction between them. Friction. To understand friction, let us consider the following example. Place the ball on the floor and push the ball to set it rolling. You will observe that the ball slows down after covering some distance and finally stops rolling and comes to a stop. Is there any force that acts on the ball and stops it?
Yes.
What is this force called? This force is known as friction and is always directed opposite to the direction of motion. Friction acts between two surfaces on contact, which can be solid, liquid, or gas. Friction can have many effects. Wear and tear. Compare the soles of a new pair of shoes with the ones that you have been wearing for some time. What causes the soles to wear out? The force of friction between the ground and the soles of your shoes wears out the soles. For example, parts of machines, tires of vehicles, etc. get worn due to the force of friction. Produces heat. When you rub your palms together, heat is produced. This is because friction produces heat. Advantages and disadvantages of friction.
So that we'll see in the next class, because that is our next topic, advantage, disadvantages. Right. So these are the two kinds of frictions. One is three kinds, you can say. One is static friction. Beyond the static friction, the force applied more than the friction and the body ready to move. That maximum friction is called limiting friction. When body starts moving, the friction is called kinetic or dynamic friction. And that kinetic friction can be either sliding or rolling. Rolling is the less than compared to the sliding or this, right? So see how the graphical representation, how the static friction, see from O to here up to static friction. Then when body starts moving, this is a limiting friction. Then it is a move, body slides, that is sliding or kinetic. That we'll discuss in the next class, right? So today we discussed mainly about what is the different types of frictions. And before that, we have discussed about we have overlooked about what is the factors affecting and how friction is necessary, what friction will do. Friction will be good and bad. It is one side is good only, other side sometimes bad also. See, why you are changing our shoe regularly. For example, maximum 3 months, 4 months, after 5 months, our shoes sole will be spoiled. Why? Because of the friction between your foot and ground. Similarly, we need to change the tires time to time. The grip of the tires is damaged. Either it is a 4-wheeler or 2-wheeler, no matter. Because of the friction. And even every time you have to change the oil into the vehicles. Because there is a rubbing between the engine parts in the vehicles, which increase the friction, which damages the parts also. So we have to put the oil and we have to reduce the friction. Some cases we need to increase the friction. Some cases we have to reduce the friction. Both are possibilities are there. Friction is good as well as friction is some cases bad also. So all those things we'll see in the coming classes. After knowing about the types of frictions, there are so many examples will be given for the, just we have seen with this also. What is the method to reduce the friction and what are the methods to increase the friction? All these things we'll discuss in the next class. Probably the one more class we'll get for the friction to complete. Okay, then we'll go for the new topic. Also, friction is very important and very continuous topic. You can find the same topic in the earlier next class also, extension of this. More is there to learn about the friction, right? So this friction part is helpful for you in regular syllabus also for you. Right? So thank you all of you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.